What if the way you've been telling your life story reveals the secret to what is holding you back? Stories play an integral part in how we see not only ourselves, but the whole world. Stories are more than just an important part of communication. They also reveal hidden aspects of our inner talk, which can either support us or end up holding us back from the very things we want most in life, without us even realizing it. Join author, mindset coach, and award-winning singer-songwriter Carrie Rowan on her show, Look for the Good, every Monday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. when she shares nuggets of wisdom from her internationally best-selling book, Tell a New Story, 5 Simple Steps to Release Your Negative Stories and Bring Joy to Your Life. Carrie's powerful stories and compelling guests will empower you to change how you look at your own life while giving you some powerful tools and tips you can use every day to help you feel better and move yourself closer to the life you've been longing to live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Look for the Good. I'm your host, Carrie Rowan, mindset strategist and coach, and I love sharing nuggets of wisdom about the stories that we tell each other, but more importantly, those stories that we tell ourselves. And you can join me and my special guests as we share our personal stories of strength and triumph every week here on Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. You can listen online on your mobile device, in your car, or ask Alexa to play Dream Vision 7 Radio. And tune in every Monday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. Eastern to get real stories and tips on how to turn your story and your life around. And evolve with us as we unite humankind with universal love. I'm so excited to be here with you guys today, and welcome to the show. Welcome, Leonora. I'm so excited to have you here as our special guest.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And before we dive in, you guys know I love talking about stories, right? Those quiet little stories that we tell in our head, but also those loud stories that we tell out to each other. And a lot of times in our lives, our story changes, right? We hope that our story evolves. Doesn't always, but sometimes our story can evolve. Or sometimes our story can get hung up, especially when we try to reinvent ourselves, right? We try to step out of that comfort zone and be something new. And if you know anything about my history, boy, you know I've done that quite a few times. So has Leonora. We're going to talk a little bit about that, how we can get stuck in that identity. What happens to us when we make that leap? What is that imposter syndrome thing that pops out, right? Like all these beliefs we have about ourselves. I love diving into that. We have so much goodness to talk about today on Look for the Good. But before I do, can I read your bio to everybody?
I'd love that.
I've got a little mini bio here because she's done so many amazing things. Dr. Leonaura Rhodes is on a mission to help 1 million people increase their happiness, health, and abundance. Her background encompasses practicing as a medical doctor, professional speaker, brain health coach, corporate trainer, and author. She's coached thousands of high performing individuals and recently launched her course, Peak Life Design. Welcome again. And I love the work you're doing. So thank you so much again for coming on.
You're very welcome. So much synergy there.
So much. And I love that we have both reinvented ourselves so many times. And I think for women in mid-age, we kind of forget what it is that we love, right? Like we just kind of go down this path, right? That was kind of laid out for us, and we did the schooling and we did the this and we did the that, and we dive into it and we do it. And one day we wake up and we go, wait, I don't think I really like this. Or we get that urge. Like I feel like it was that feeling for me, that little knocking of, hello, you're supposed to be doing something more, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about your story around that.
Well, I've had a couple of moments in my life where I've been in my dream job and then realized that I hate it. And one of those, the most recent of those was I was working as a coach for Tony Robbins. I was a results coach and business results trainer. I had done some training with him about 10 years prior, and I was like that, the pinnacle of being a coach is working for Tony. And I got into the training program. It's this kind of very robust 4-month training program where there's a live section in the middle and they can fire you at any moment. It's a wild training program. And then I got picked to be one of his coaches, and for a while I really, really loved it. And It's funny, I often say when I started working for Tony, I thought I was a good coach, but by the time I left, I knew I was a good coach because we had so much training and so much experience. I coached several thousand people when I worked for Tony, which is, experience that most coaches don't get in a lifetime. And so it was all going well, and then COVID happened, and a lot of the coaches were laid off because it's essentially an events company, and the business was trying to scramble and figure out how to make things work. And I went from being a part-time coach to being a more than full-time coach. I had 65 clients, which was 3 times a month at one stage, and I was working, I'd made a commitment years ago not to work weekends, and I found myself having to work Saturdays, and it was getting longer and longer on Saturdays. And, I was kind of starting to really not enjoy the work. It was just too much, and the quality was going down. And then November of 2020, I went to a party, and as you remember, it was the second wave of COVID.
Hmm.
And I wore a mask at the party, but took it off to eat. And sure enough, a few days later, I start coughing and I have asthma. And so I ended up with pneumonia, very low oxygen levels. I spent 4 and a bit hours in the ER, and the doctor kind of sent me home. He said, we could bring you in, but you know, if you come in, you might die, type of thing. So I'm like, I'll go home and ride this out. But I had a night where I really thought I was going to die. I had a really high fever, couldn't breathe. My oxygen levels were super low. If you know what about oxygen levels, I was kind of down to in the mid 80s and gasping for breath. And it was a very scary night, as you can imagine. And I made goodbye videos for my whole family. And I kind of then lay there and thought, well, if I'm gifted more life, what will I do with it? And I had a moment where I said, if I live, I want to work for myself again. I want to do things my way, and I want to help 1 million people. My husband often laughs at me about this. He's like, how many are you up to now? And I'm like, I have no idea, but it's a nice round number, and it's an ambitious goal to head towards. So, I left working for Tony, and I've been running my business ever since, and doing lots of different things, doing podcasts. I have my own podcast, and I do corporate training, and I've just kind of found this way to repackage my knowledge and my experience, to help people in a different way. And I absolutely love what I'm doing now.
Ah, you gave me goosebumps with your story. And that's, I think so many people can relate to that.
Yeah.
It was just such a crazy time. But the fact that you had the clarity to A, make videos, and B, make that decision, right? I feel like a lot of times having that strong purpose is what gets us through something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is
And I've
really.
always had a strong sense of purpose
Hmm.
since I decided I want to be a doctor at 12 years old. I kind of did this project in school that was about health inequalities. And I'm like, that is, I've got to be a doctor. I've got to help people in that way. So I've always been somebody who's purpose and service driven. And I think, there's many ways to do that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that in a corporate setting. But I'm like you, Carrie. I'm entrepreneurial. I'm a free thinker. I like to do things my own way, and so I think the entrepreneurial life really suits me.
I love that. But the
Yeah,
background you had must have been so incredible because I know that, I know Tony's program. I am certified as a strategic intervention coach. So I've
yeah,
been through that program, not his actual training program, but I love all things Tony. Um, but I can see the intensity of that. That must have given you, I mean, that's the key. Like you said, most coaches don't get that experience, so they never get that good because they don't have that many clients
yeah.
to be able to test it all and work through all that and get better and understand different situations. So that's invaluable. And I love that you just package that all up into this beautiful new offering that you're doing now. And what a valuable thing that is to really come with all of that experience to a corporate environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And the cool thing when I worked for Tony, I was the first physician to get through the program. They'd had other physicians apply, but you have to you have to give up the medical model when you're a coach. And the
Mm.
medical model is that of I'm the expert, I'm going to tell you what to do. And I remember the head of coaching telling me, most doctors fail the program because they're trying to be very prescriptive. And, as a coach, you have to work with the person to help them come up with their own prescription rather than giving them one. And so I ended up most of my clients were medical professionals. I also got a handful of kind of lawyers and other people in the health sphere. But it was really interesting to be. I ended up pretty much just working with very high performing individuals. And it was really interesting to see the common themes that were occurring and similar to mine. You reach the pinnacle of your career, you have all this success on paper, life looks incredible. But then when you are coaching somebody, you realize that many of those people are actually deeply unhappy and unfulfilled. And a lot of people are kind of feel that they're plodding through life and just accepting what comes along for them and not having much autonomy, not really designing their life intentionally. And that really struck me as a lesson from that work.
Ooh, I just got a chill when you said that. And I feel like that so many things you said are so pertinent, but being able to create the life,
Yeah.
and having that intention, that strong intention, that purpose. I was listening to something the other day and it was talking about this study that was done about, happiness, right? And they did a study where they said, okay, what would make you happy? So they gave them those things that would make them happy. And then they studied that group, excuse me, and they were no happier than the
Yes.
control group, right?
Yeah.
But when they went to the group and they said, okay, we're going to give you this project to make somebody else happy, guess what happened?
Mm,
Their happiness rates all raised. So as Tony talks about those highest levels, right, on his scale of the six human needs,
yeah.
is the need for growth, but contribution.
Yes.
And I feel like, you might be making a contribution. And like you said, it looks great on paper. It reminds me of my corporate job, but there was still that thing inside of me. I wasn't fulfilling that need that we know, that higher calling, which we were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how do we have those moments, we have those epiphanies ourselves. What do you think is that bridge? How do you help people the most? What do you think? Is it an aha moment to help them get from point A to point B? We're
Yeah.
always filling in that gap of how to get from where you are today and where you want to be as a coach, right?
Yeah.
What do you think is the most important thing or the most important mindset for somebody to have when they're trying to figure out what is that for me?
Well, I think most people, when they're looking to make a change in their life, so they kind of realize that I'm not that happy and I want to make a change. Most people miss an essential step, which is that of evaluating where they are now. Because we are often running scripts for our life that are totally outdated. And me as a brain health geek, what this translates into, there's wiring in the brain, which is old wiring. It's from childhood, it's from early adulthood, and we are running these scripts in our life and making decisions based on a person that we aren't any longer. And so for me, a really, really important part of the process of transformation is really discovering who you are today. What, who are you? What makes you tick? What is your higher sense of purpose? What is meaningful to you? What does in the day to day make you happy? And being really intentional about finding out those things, because once you know, it's a bit like, I often use the analogy of, if you're taking a journey today, people think all you need to know is where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie,
Right.
you and I grew up in the day of maps.
Yes, we
when
did.
you when you had to plan a journey with a map, the first thing that you had to know is where you were starting from.
Absolutely.
And so I think that step is hugely important. And then you get very intentional about, okay, where do I precisely want to go, and how do I want my life to look, and being intentional about that step as well.
So true.
Yeah.
And I feel like that step, it sounds so easy, but it's not. Like you can't
Yeah.
go GPS. Just because you're not putting your starting address doesn't mean it doesn't know your starting address, right? But
Yeah.
it's really taking a look at that and being honest. I love what you were saying about the old program because I like to talk about the 7-year-old, because of everything, a lot of that program comes into our brain before we were 7. And would you let that
Hmm.
7-year-old drive the car? Well, he is driving the car right now. So if you're
Yeah.
okay with that, right?
Yeah.
But otherwise, you got to peel that back and look at that and ask those hard questions because I feel like it's this busyness epidemic, right? We
Yeah.
don't ever stop enough to evaluate because that might be too painful.
Yes, absolutely. And what happens when people don't do that first step is they redesign their life, they put in all that hard work only to find they've jumped out of the frying pan into the fire and they still don't like their life. And I think that's, you know, as a physician and also having nearly died, life is extremely precious. And we don't know how long we've got. And I don't say that to be depressing or anything, but that is the truth. We don't know how long we've got, and every day is precious. And why not be like really intentional about it? Why not use that time well? And I'm sure you've heard, I'm sure some of your guests have also spoken about it. There was a great book that came out probably like 15 years ago now called The Five Regrets of the Dying by Bonnie Ware. And she asked people who were at the end of life, what do you regret? And the biggest thing, or one of the five things, was that I had the power to be happier all along. Can you imagine discovering that on your deathbed, and like you've wasted all those years of joy and happiness and gratitude and those little moments, and you've been looking outward when you could have been looking inward. And so, I believe in preventing those regrets as much as humanly
That,
possible.
that's so funny. I talk about that all the time. I
Yeah.
call it my rocking chair test. Where you
Yeah.
walk somebody through sitting on the rocking chair and imagining why not do it today instead of waiting till we're on our deathbed, right?
Yes.
But they also talked about it was that one thing that they didn't do. They didn't talk about what they
Yeah.
did do, right? That was
Yeah.
one of them. They didn't do that. Or they didn't, that one thing, that one dream that kept calling and calling, and they push it away and push it away. And it was that thing that they regretted the most, is really stepping into who they are. They're, like you said, your own power.
Yeah.
I think that's so important. And, you probably think the same thing, but I find a lot of people don't know what they want, especially
Yeah.
women. They don't
Hmm.
know. If you ask them, they don't know. They don't know what they love and they don't know what they want.
Yeah. I actually have an exercise that I call the magic wand that I do with everybody that I work with, where I ask them some, simple questions about what they want. And it's it's really interesting. Physical things very rarely come up. So there are four key questions it's a long survey, but there's four questions at the beginning. If you had a magic wand, what do you want less of?
Mm,
If you had a magic wand, what do you want more of? If you had a magic wand, what do you want to feel less often? And if you had a magic wand, what do you want to feel more often?
love it.
And when I started doing it, I thought it was going to be like people were going to be saying, I want a bigger house, I want a car, I want a diamond ring. It never comes up. Physical stuff never comes up.
Yeah, I believe it. That's why you can have all these amazingly rich celebrities and people who
Yeah.
look like they have it all and they are so unhappy inside.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we're going to break on this moment because I know everybody is hanging on your every word, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Look for the Good. We are having an incredible conversation here with Leonora, and I love your magic wand exercise. I feel like people can get so much out of that. Um, and it's so interesting, isn't it, that people, you just think that people are so obsessed with their things in this now, in this
Yeah.
day and age. We're so externally focused, our time, our attention, everything is like outside of us. We don't spend that time inside. But when what you're saying is when you really do sit down with people and you really have them go through that exercise, they get the opportunity that they never do to really go deep
Yeah,
inside with a trusted guide, and I love that. I think that's so important.
yeah, absolutely.
Can you share a story of something that was made a real big impact when you were doing this with somebody or a client?
Yeah, I'm thinking of a client that I'm still working with right now. An absolutely brilliant woman. She's also a physician who's kind of left medicine to do online courses and things like that. And when she came to work with me and she filled it, I have this kind of form that you fill in when you start. She's like, I want to learn how to make more money in my business. Very interestingly, the Magic Wand survey and then some additional coaching that went on around money turned out that she had grown up in scarcity and that actually she was not driven by money at all, but massively driven by service. A little bit like me, and a lot of people in the medical profession are like that too. And so every time she would set a goal and it had a money outcome, she'd have resistance to it. And she would massively procrastinate and get really kind of stuck and self-sabotage. And what we discovered, through the Magic Wand survey and then further coaching was when she actually set the goal to be one of service, of reaching people, of helping people, of transforming lives, when she had that as her goal, she was highly motivated. She didn't procrastinate and she didn't self-sabotage because was what was really in her heart. That was what she wanted to move towards. And we had to work around saying, well, if you do that, money will follow, and you do need to learn to be comfortable with accepting that form of abundance into your life. We also did some work on, redefining money and wealth as just a form of energy transference, which made a huge difference for her. She'd kind of grown up in an atmosphere where it's like rich people are evil, and
Yeah.
they've got there by manipulating people and by being dishonest. And so we did 3 sessions around money and transforming what the goals would be into being more about kind of service and health and what really mattered to her.
I
And
love
it's made
that.
a massive difference.
Oh, and then when you let all that go, right? It's
Yeah.
amazing when you can really, let that go. Those old stories, I talk
Yeah.
about in my book, I talk about the 5 steps to release those negative stories. And that's just your money story, right? It's our
No.
money story.
Yeah.
A lot of people have those very similar things that you just said because they grew up in a scarcity mindset. So they have a scarcity mindset, but they don't always realize they have a scarcity mindset,
Totally. Yeah.
which is
Absolutely.
which is why someone brilliant like you can come in and we can stand back and be objective and be like, ooh, here's what I'm seeing. And then you can take steps to release those. It's so freeing, and it's amazing how the abundance will just pour in after that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I love
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
I'm feeling like, in this day and age, there's so much stress, there's so much anxiety. So many people have anxiety around money, around what they're
Mhm.
doing, the future. There's so much uncertainty in the world right now, and I love to talk about, I don't think people really understand this piece of it either, which is really balancing their nervous system. And we both kind of
Mm.
like to geek out on this brain stuff. And it's like, how do we do that, right? Like everybody's kind of, I feel like, searching, but they're really going towards, it feels like, the numbing out, the
Yes.
Netflix or the wine at night or whatever your thing is, the shopping. It just feels like a bunch of stuff down, and everything
Hmm.
with social media. It's just a whole big ball of anxiety, and we're seeing it in our young people, and that's what's so distressing.
Yeah.
What do you think that we could do? What is something that you do to help people to understand their nervous system and help them rewire that, just like you did with the abundance? How do they rewire that anxiety in their nervous
Yeah.
system?
And by the way, when I do the magic wand, and when I wrote a book about 10 years ago called Beyond Soccer Mom, and I wanted to write a book that wasn't for me, because I wanted to write a book that was for the people I was trying to help. And you can't assume that you know what other people are going through. But stress and anxiety and worry were the top things that came up, in things people wanted less of and what they wanted to feel less of. And I think, you know, it's funny. I'm just actually finishing up editing a course on managing stress. It's one of my favorite things because I was severely stressed for about 15 years. And I look back and it makes me really sad now because I know that it harmed me and it robbed me of my joy and my fulfillment and of presence as well. Like when you're super stressed, you can't connect at a deep level with people around you. You're just kind of constantly, hyper vigilant.
So true.
And, I ended up there from being I found being a doctor in hospitals very stressful. There's a lot of responsibility, and some people are really well suited to that, but I was not particularly one of those people. I used to take on, everybody else's woes, and I used to wake up in the middle of the night worrying about that person that I'd seen. Um, so I think the first step with stress is acknowledging that it's a problem. Knowing that a little bit of stress is a good thing. We need some stress in our lives, otherwise we would be lying on the couch all the time watching Netflix. So we need a little bit of stress. It's a normal biological mechanism to arouse, wake up the nervous system to get it ready for action. But what we end up with today is a chronic drip, drip, drip of stress where people's nervous system is chronically over aroused, on the verge of being stressed all the time. And so it doesn't take much, an email. An email pinging, or when you're already busy, or somebody asking you to do one more thing
Yeah.
in that day, and people tip over into full-blown stress reaction, which is so harmful for us. It's
Mm.
like one of the worst things. It's like stress is, it's worse than smoking.
Right.
um
Yeah.
and so, we want to learn to know when we're getting stressed, to identify the early signs of it, and then to be able to take action, to be able to, I call it the window. We have a window of opportunity with stress where you can take action. Beyond that window of opportunity, you're like an angry alligator. You're in full blown survival mode. There's no negotiating, being logical. You've just gone into, crazy mode.
Yeah.
And I mean, I used to do it a lot. I do it less now, but I can still kind of recognize when I'm doing it. It's this horrible spiral where you're like, I don't want to be thinking and feeling and behaving in this way, but my body's taken over. And so identifying triggers to stress,
Mm.
like what is it that's tipping you over? And then increasing self-awareness to the early signs, and then developing a really robust toolkit. And you
Mm.
need multiple tools in your toolkit because there's lots of different types of stress, there's lots of different triggers. And sometimes you can find a tool, like I meditate a lot. Sometimes it's amazing, and sometimes it just doesn't work.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? It's
I
like
totally know what you mean.
yeah, and in that situation, I've worked with many people who have one tool that they over rely on, and it's often exercise, especially with
Mm.
high performing people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then all of a sudden, for one reason or another, injury, busy schedule, some change in life, they can't exercise regularly, and they have nothing left. They have no tool left. And so we need a robust toolkit of including many different tools in order to be able to, when stress does strike, to be able to do something about it.
I love
Uh,
that.
And the final piece with stress is if your brain is unhealthy, it's going to get stressed more, and it's going to get stressed worse, and it's going to get stressed for longer. And so brain health is the first place to start. Everybody, and after I had COVID, I had brain fog for about 5 or 6 months, and it was really scary. I look back and I'm like, if that had been the rest of my life, that would have really sucked. It was horrible.
Yeah.
Um, having a healthy brain allows you to do all the stuff that you want to do. So I urge people to get very obsessed about, having a healthy brain. And when you make a decision, ask yourself, is this good for my brain or bad for my brain?
I love that. Yeah, it reminds me of Dr. Amen's work as well.
Yeah, I'm trained with Amen, and it's it's so true. And I think when people haven't had an unhealthy brain,
Hmm.
and I hadn't really experienced that until I had the brain fog, and I had terrible memory problems. For a while, I couldn't finish a sentence. I would be losing, so I would have lost so many words that I couldn't put a sentence together. I'd be like,
Wow.
that thing that you sit on that's like got four legs and, oh, a chair. Like, it was like that. It
Wow.
was so scary.
That is
And I
scary.
think if you've not ever experienced that, and I wouldn't wish that upon my worst enemy, it's very hard to kind of appreciate what it's like to have an unhealthy brain, or like a very unhealthy brain. But many people have just a little bit of an unhealthy brain. They're just tolerating it because they just don't know
Hmm.
what it feels like to have a healthy brain. So
Yeah,
I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there.
no, I love that.
Don't get me started on
I
brain
love
health.
all things brain health. No, I love that. And I'm always watching his little clips come up on my feed.
Yeah,
And yeah, that question, is this healthy for my brain, right?
yeah.
When whatever it is that you're going to do,
Hmm.
is this healthy for my brain? It's a great little question. I love to plant those little seeds in our head because that's how the brain works, right? Just little questions, just like those little negative stories. Sometimes we can have really good positive little stories that can
Yeah,
kind of come up for us, and questions, because when we ask the brain a question, it has to give us an answer, right? So
yeah.
if we're putting better questions in, we're going to get better answers. I love that. I think that's so cool. But I love what you said too about stress is worse than cigarettes. But people don't realize, like, their threshold, their tolerance for stress just starts raising and raising. And I love Dr. Joe Dispenza, who talks about the animals. Like, you see an animal, maybe a gazelle is being chased by something, but that's over in less than
I
five
know.
minutes. And then they're just grazing again, happily. Not us. We're ruminating. We're telling everybody about it. We're creating new stories in our head about it. And we're living that on for another couple weeks, you know?
Yes. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's really part of the problem.
Yeah. It's and I when I'm coaching people about brain health, I'll kind of say, the human brain is absolutely amazing. What an incredible organ it is. It's just like really remarkable. But it works in mysterious ways. It's not logical at all, and it has many design faults.
Mm.
And including in the human brain, and we don't really know if animals do this, but like you said, the ruminating, the kind of repeating a story over and over again, it's like taking poison every day, and we can't just let go of it. And that is unfortunately a design fault in the human brain,
Hmm.
that we can learn to overcome if we become aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just,
Yeah.
and I tell my clients, just think of it, you got to learn to talk to that brain. You got to learn to
Yes.
override that stuff, right? And we can
Yes.
talk about that when we come back from the break. We're going to break real quick. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on Look for the Good with Leonora. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Look for the Good. I love what we're talking about here, Leonora. And this, you were just talking about the brain having some flaws, and I love that. I tell my clients that all the time. It's just the brain doing its job. It
Yeah.
thinks it's keeping you safe, and it's your job to realize that and override that. Let's talk a little bit about that. How can people identify when, wait, my brain's just going a little crazy? It's not really telling me the truth all the time.
Yes. I think you have to come up with a way to check in with yourself regularly. I actually have I send my clients a business card with what I call the well-being scale on it, and it goes from -10 to +10. And I ask them to put it up somewhere where they can see it, and so that they can kind of check in, like,
Mm.
where are you now? And if you're dipping into the negative, if you're starting to spiral downwards, you need to stop. Don't carry on spiraling downwards. And unless you're aware of it, you can't make a choice. Like, your biology just kind of takes over. And so, we want to take command of our brain and mind more often, and ask it how it's feeling. and and take action if you're heading down a route that is negative. And I work, like I said, I work with a lot of high performers, and I work with a lot of C-suite professionals as well. There's one young woman I'm working with at the minute, and she's 30, but she's got into a very senior position. And I spoke to her the other day, and she's like, "Oh, I often don't take a break during the day, and sometimes I forget to eat." And she's like working solidly for 10 hours. And I questioned her and said, but how much of that time are you actually really productive and really able to kind of be in your best state? And she was like, oh. And she's got into such a negative spiral that she's forgotten to use all of the tools that that I've taught her. I had to kind of take her aside and say, "Come on, you know what to do." But it's such a common thing to happen. We forget when we're stressed, we forget all of the tools that we have access to.
Exactly. I talk about that all the time because that's the hardest time to find
Yeah.
those if you're trying to become aware and you're trying to find the stories that are keeping you held, or you're
Yes.
trying to remember that toolkit. You can't because you're in that back brain, and that
Yeah.
prefrontal cortex is shut down. That's our thinking brain, our logical brain that says, "Hey, wait a second." So yeah, you have to have a go-to. Give me an
Yes.
example of a go-to that you might use for yourself. Or a little mantra. I love asking people if they have a little personal mantra that they say to themselves when they feel themselves kind of getting out of whack.
So I actually have a mantra that I developed from a peak state formula, which I'm not going to go into. And when I start feeling like in a funk, then I'll do this mantra, and it's developed over many years, and it's kind of 5 sentences long. But
Oh,
there is one that I teach to everybody. It's like one of the first tools is from Emile Coué, and Tony Robbins teaches it a lot. Um, it was kind of one of the things that turned his life around when he was a young man struggling. And the mantra is, every day in every way, I'm getting better and better.
I love
And
that.
and this embraces the whole kind of growth mindset thing.
Yes.
That we as humans have huge potential, and that if we're intentional about how we live our life, we can be getting a little bit better and better. Even if we have a bad day, if we can learn from that bad day, if we can kind of say, oh, I figured out why that was such a bad day, and then we can change things going forward, then we are continuously growing and improving. And I also coach parents of special needs kids, and a lot of these kids, probably at least half of them, have ADHD as well. And so I teach them, first of all, they do a mindfulness practice, which is a tactile mindfulness practice, which is
Mm.
really good for people who have a busy mind, because you're like focusing on your fingertips, and you're focusing on your breath. So I get them calmed down, and then they do the Emile Coué mantra while punching across the midline.
Mm.
And what this is doing, it's getting activating the two sides of the brain to kind of communicate with each other. It's kind of waking up the brain. And so they do it 10 times every day in every way. I'm getting better and better. Yes.
Mm.
And so you can develop your own one, but if you want a mantra to start with, that is one of the most simple and concise yet brilliant mantras that exist.
I have had that on the back of my bathroom door.
Yeah,
That particular one, I'm a big, huge Tony
amazing.
fan. I talk
Yeah,
about my book for quite some time, but I love combining it with sort of, I would call it an energy medicine kind of tool, right? Like
yeah,
something concrete and physical. Crossing the midline reminds me of like super brain yoga, which I'm sure you've heard about,
yeah,
where you cross midline and you go down into a squat. But yeah, really using that both sides of the brain, full functioning brain. That's why I love kids playing musical instruments. It's one of those few things
yeah,
that's full brain functioning, right? Left brain. But anytime you can do something that's crossing midline like that, brain gym. Remember, brain gym was
yes,
popular for a
absolutely.
while.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. My mother taught my eldest son. It taught his class for a while, and she had just discovered Brain Gym, and it was a class. There were 17 children in the class, and six had special needs, and pretty bad behavioral problems. And so at the beginning of every lesson, she would get them to do brain gym. And she took this class from being this like wild, out of control, scary class to she could actually get them to focus for fairly long periods of time by doing brain gym. It's brilliant. It seems to have gone out of fashion a little bit, but I
I
think it's,
know. I
yeah.
don't know why, but and my daughter used to go, my youngest used to go, I would drop it off at school early because Reebok had this box program where they would do it before school, right? It was based on the studies by Dr. Ratty about the schools that with the brain improvement and this and the test
Yeah.
scores based on
Yeah.
doing this. Just exercise, is
Yeah.
so important for the brain, but the right kind of exercise, like we're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. And I also, going back to what you asked me about tools, I do believe the research on mindfulness practice is so compelling that I believe everybody needs to find a mindfulness practice that works for them. And we are so lucky today. When I started learning mindfulness practice, it was with tapes. Remember
Right.
tapes?
Oh, I have all Tony's tapes. My first series of Tony's Personal Power is
Really?
all tapes.
Yeah, it was tapes and then it was CDs and you had to buy them and. But
Put it in your
now,
car.
now there's hundreds of thousands of mindfulness practices
Mm,
available on YouTube or on your
yeah.
phone, and there's some great apps and things. So because the research is so compelling, it's really good for stress management, but it's also really good for brain health. It's good for physical health. It's good for relationships, performance, you name it. Mindfulness practice I call it a multi-tool. It's like it's so good for everything. It's like your Swiss Army knife
I
for
love it.
life. So I urge people listening, if they don't have a mindfulness practice, to go out and start experimenting. It can take a bit of experimenting because you need to find something that works for you. And a lot of people who have a busy mind say, I can't do that kind of mindfulness practice where they're like, it's silent for 5 minutes. I totally get
Mm,
that. I have
mm-hmm.
ADHD as well. I can't sit with
Yeah.
silence. I can now, but I didn't
Right.
used to be able to.
I think we all
Um,
have that. Yeah.
yeah. So I think, and the research shows 12 minutes a day or more is the sweet
Mm-hmm.
spot. And the good news is you can split that up. It doesn't need to be all in one sitting. It could be 5 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes at lunchtime and 2 minutes in the middle of the afternoon. And I'm not doing the math in my head as I'm going, but if you can aim to do 12 minutes during the day, 2 minutes can be worth it. When I used to do neurofeedback therapy, I used to be looking at people's brainwave activity and I would teach them to meditate. And you would see it was like a seesaw going in the brain between 1 and 2 minutes of mindfulness practice.
Mm-hmm.
The stressed part of the brain would start to calm, and the awake, calm, clear-headed part of the brain, and basically the prefrontal cortex,
Mm,
would
mm-hmm.
come online within 1 to 2 minutes of doing mindfulness practice.
Isn't that amazing?
And I was working with severely autistic children. So
Right.
if it can work for them, it can work for everybody else.
I love that. And it is so simple. And I think people try to overcomplicate it. And that's
Yeah.
what everybody's, oh, I can't do that. I can't keep I'm terrible at that. People would say to me a lot because I have 5 meditations in my book. No, I'm not. I can't do meditation. No, I'm not any good at it. Nobody's good at it. There's no getting good at it.
Exactly.
It just
Yeah.
makes you good. It makes you better at your life. You don't have to be good at meditation. We don't care about that.
Yeah.
But just taking that time, like you said before, which I think is so crucial, is we're not living in present moment. I call it PMA, not to be confused with PMS. Present moment awareness is being
Yeah.
in this moment, right? And that's where it's lacking. That's where the magic happens. That's where our
Mm.
creativity and all those amazing, juicy things about being human happen. But we spend so little time in there, which is why I love mindfulness. It's bringing us, you can be mindful with your cup of tea in the morning,
Exactly.
right? You can take your 2 minutes to really think about the cup and how it feels in your hand and what's the tea,
Yeah.
what's it taste like? Let me swirl it in my mouth. What's it smell? As long as you bring your senses in. I mean, it doesn't take a lot. And I think people don't understand how simple it could be.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's overcomplicated. I was just actually editing last night. My stress management course has a meditation section to it as well. And I have rules for meditation. Rule one, there are no rules for meditation and there are no meditation police. It's like it's your practice. You do whatever you like,
Yeah,
but
I
you,
love
you
that.
need to show up and you need to, You need to give it a shot. That's actually all that really matters.
Show up. I love it because you're showing up for you, right? You're
Yeah,
showing up for yourself. You're not showing up for anybody else. You really kind of are, but because when you show up for you, you really you have so much more to give to everybody else, right? So then you
exactly.
improve not just your relationship with you and you, but your
Hmm.
relationship with you and everybody in the world, which is really the hidden magic of all that.
I love that you said that. And I think, a lot of people feel that self-care is selfish, when in fact it is the opposite. Because, like you said, if you are depleted, if you're stressed, if you are not able to be present, you can't be that friend, you can't be that parent, you can't be that work colleague who is your best self for that other person. And so self-care and mindfulness practice, all that stuff is an act of, yes, it is first of all for you, but when you are in a good place, then you can show up for other people.
I
And
love that.
people totally miss that, especially parents.
Yes, exactly. It's the
Yeah,
oxygen mask, right?
totally.
It's the put it on. You got to put it on yourself first,
Yeah,
and it's not selfish. And when you can give yourself those couple minutes, and I love what Tony's old saying way back in my tape days was live with an attitude of gratitude, right? Because
yes,
when you can appreciate what you have, you're changing everything. You're rewiring your brain with gratitude, and
yeah,
mix a little bit of that with your mindfulness, and you've got this formula. It sounds, I think people think it sounds too simple, so it might not work.
yeah. And
Right?
and it's funny that you mentioned that. I was teaching a corporate training course yesterday on positivity, and I said, one of the things that I was teaching about was like, do more things that make you happy. And I'm like, that always sounds so utterly obvious. And yet, when people are stressed and depressed and, all of the negative things, they forget to do the really obvious things that they know that work for them. And it is, we totally overcomplicate things today.
We do. It's partly this, you have to have an app for that, or
Yeah.
you have to be a guru, or you have to have all these degrees
Yeah.
and everything to be. No, all you have to do is just the intention, right?
Yeah.
I want to feel better. I just want to feel a little better, right? Is a great little mantra to say yourself. So maybe
Mm,
today you do one thing to make yourself feel a little better. And what
yeah.
I find is put it in your calendar. If it's not in your calendar, you're not going to do it.
Yes.
So people don't think about putting, all right, these are the 5 minutes. We block time for other stuff or reports we have to write and all. Block
Yeah.
time for yourself. Here's when I'm going to do my 10 minutes here and my 10 minutes here, or
Yeah.
5 minutes here, 5 minutes there.
Absolutely. I
Um,
quite agree. There's an expression, I don't know it accurately, but it's something like, if you think you don't have 5 minutes to meditate, you need to do 10 to 20 minutes.
yes, yes. Yes, I love that. It's like an old Zen thing, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
as Tony says, if you don't have time, if you don't have 5 or 10 minutes for yourself, you don't really have a life.
I know.
Right? What kind of life is that if you can't even stop? And I love
Yeah,
what you said too about people forgetting. Like, when women come into my practice and I ask them what they love, it's kind of sad that they don't remember anymore. They can tell you what everybody else
no,
around them loves, right?
I know.
But
Yeah,
we forget that because we're become so conditioned as moms and just providers and
yeah.
in service to others that we forget to take care of ourselves.
It is really sad. When my kids both had a lot of health problems when they were little, went to a children's party and we arrived super early. We had a long trip to get there, and there was a trampoline set up for the kids, and actually it was a bouncy castle, and there were two other mums, and they were like, "Should we go on first?" And so we went on, and we were just like, laughing our heads off. It was just absolutely brilliant. And somebody took a photo, and I was like mid-air with a big smile on my face. And the photo actually made me really sad because I realized that I hadn't had fun in such a long time, because life had become so serious. My kids, and I did need to pay attention to my kids being sick, and there was a lot of stuff going on. But I could not remember the last time that I had fun. I mean, how sad is that?
I know we get it's so true, especially I feel like when we're moms and we have kids
Yeah.
because life just got serious. We can't be going out with girlfriends and laughing and having a glass of wine. We got to
Yeah.
be serious. We got to figure this stuff out, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It
So
becomes obsessive. Yeah. So I love that. I love that you're putting some simplicity to this and you really make it sound like, hey, anybody can do this. You know, we can turn our lives around. And it's in those very small little things like you're describing. It's in those small moments of awareness. Um, and those small moments that we can give ourselves that we really can show up better for everybody else.
agreed. Yeah.
I love that.
Stupidly simple.
I love I love that. And we're just so cynical about things that are simple, but sometimes simple is best.
Yes.
And in this case, it really is simplifying your life. I love that. Well, I have just loved this conversation. We could talk for a whole nother hour about the brain
Absolutely.
stuff. We haven't even dove into the neurofeedback stuff, which I'm a huge fan of. So I have a feeling we'll be having you back on the show, but this has been a lovely conversation. And, tell us again where they can find out more information about you and this new amazing class that you're offering.
So my website is drleonaurarhodes.com, and I have this funny spelling. So it's Leonaura. Thank you, Mother, for giving me a really difficult name as well.
It's okay. We spell everything on radio.
Absolutely. And so my course, which is called Peak Life Design, is on there. My new stress management course will be up there soon as well. And I hope it comes across. I dearly love doing this work, and I think we all deserve to be happy, healthy, and abundant in our lives. And like we've just been talking about, it's actually simpler than most people think.
I love that. Thank you so much. And I know my listeners have gleaned so much incredible wealth of information from this today. So thank you for coming on and sharing all your insights. I absolutely love the work you're doing.
Thank you. You too.
Helping to change the world. And remember, everybody, if you want to know what's going on behind the scenes, go to my website at carrierowan.com, click on the podcast button, and sign up for my mailing list so you can find out all these really cool things like this conversation that Leonora had and I had before the show. So, and remember, it is never too late to live your best life. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Look for the Good with your host, Carrie Rowan, best-selling author and mindset coach. Join us every Monday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. right here at Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. If you weren't able to catch an episode, no worries. Just visit our website to find all the archived episodes of Look for the Good on demand, so you don't miss a thing. And remember, it's never too late to live your best story. For additional resources or to find out about how you can work with Carrie directly, visit carrierowan.com for more details.